Hello, welcome to another episode of Simply Nerdy. I'm your host, Steven, and I'm joined today by Anthony.
Hello, everyone.
And we are here to further discuss this alleged leak about Breath of the Wild 2 and the Switch 2. You've heard my thoughts as well as Hayden's, and now we want to hear from the one, the only, Anthony. So Anthony, let's hear some of your thoughts. What do you think about this leak? And is it true? Is it not? Is it legit? Are there problems? Because Hayden and I believe there's problems, but let's hear from you.
Sure. Well, first of all, you're a goober, but I think so. You guys have probably already watched Stephen and Hayden's take on this. With a lot of what they said, I feel like I kind of agree that I take this with a huge grain of salt, and so to be honest, right now I'm not putting much stock into these rumors. However, I did have a bunch of thoughts on. So I guess this video is kind of about my thoughts if the rumor turns out to be true. So I mean, like, as far as the Breath of the Wild 2 or Breath of the Darkness, as they're calling it in the leak, goes, I have almost no qualms with that. You know, if Breath of the Wild 2 is coming in January 2021, then yes, please bring it, and more Breath of the Wild I'm never going to complain about. So
yeah, 100% agree. If that's the release date, great.
So I probably won't say much more there. Other than that, I think that January 2021, I feel like is almost too good to be true for me to put my trust in, especially since this is a Zelda game, and Zelda games are notorious for getting delayed. So that's probably all my thoughts there. The majority of my thoughts tie to the rumors about the Switch 2 and what that entails for the future of Nintendo's console market. The reason why I think I have a lot to say on this subject is because I feel like this is not the first time that I've heard specifically the rumor that the Switch 2, as they're calling it, will be a home-only console. Like, it's tied to the TV, there's no switching, there's no portability of any sort.
Well, this is the first time I've heard it, so that's why I didn't give much stock in it. But if there's been other rumors, I don't know, maybe we'll have to consider this leak a little bit more, I suppose.
Well, and it's not that I'm saying that I've heard them from reputable sources. I mean, they've been more sketchy than even the one that we're talking about here. The fact of the matter is, I've just heard the rumblings a lot. The things I talk about from here on is on the assumption that, we live in a world where it turns out that this leak is true. If that's the case, here are my thoughts. So the first thing, my first reaction is kind of major disappointment with their decision of going for a home-only console.
Well, no kidding.
For me, like, and I imagine for you and probably for
most of us,
I feel like the revelation of the Switch was the fact that you could have it be a portable, console you can take with you on the go, but you can also put it on the TV and play with friends or just play by yourself if you want to. And sure, that required a lot of concessions that has held back its power and kind of held it back from the other competitors. But I think that for the majority of people who are big fans of the Switch, that's not important, because it's the enjoyment that comes from the flexibility and the ability to take this wherever you want to go that makes it such a revelation. I would argue that it's honestly the portable mode that is more important, and I'm going to qualify that here. I feel like the reason why being able to play console-level games on the go, on the Switch, is such a big deal is because you can take these with you on the go. I think that ultimately is what has made it such a revelation. I personally prefer to have both abilities, but if I were to say which one's more important, I would argue the portability. And so for me, the Switch Lite makes a lot more sense to me than what they're saying about the Switch 2.
I totally agree. Though I do personally play a lot more docked, but still, just having the option of going portable whenever I need to makes it so I can play games.
That being said, in some ways, I think one of the reasons why maybe I'm kind of considering this leak a little bit more than I otherwise might is because in some ways it seems like a very Nintendo thing to do by this point, because they've already revealed the Switch Lite, And so in some ways, doing a Switch 2, which is the opposite of the Switch Lite, almost seems like the next step for them. If that concession has to be made, then my next thought is this. Nintendo absolutely cannot afford to hold back in the power department.
Oh, 100%.
At all. And here's...
Nope, there's no excuse at that point.
No, because in the past, I mean, the reason I feel like the only justification that Nintendo has ever had in holding back on making their consoles as powerful as the competitors is because they were trying to maintain a budget-friendly console for their more family-centric audience. If the Switch 2 isn't actually a generational upgrade, but it's just another kind of like the opposite of the Switch Lite, but still the Switch family of systems, we've already got the budget-friendly version in the Switch Lite. We do not need the Switch 2 to be budget-friendly anymore. If the Switch Lite is for, the family-friendly aspect, the Switch 2, whatever it is, needs to be the enthusiast-centric and
the core gamer
version.
Yeah.
Holding back in any way, they just simply don't have the justification at this point. The leaks suggest that they've already said they're going to support 4K 60 FPS, kind of the standards at this point, but this console is slated to release roughly around the same time as the next generation.
That's what I was about to say. They're going to have to match the 8K right away.
I think that they need to be on a level with those other consoles. Do I honestly trust that that's what they're going to do? Like, part of me really doesn't think so, because when it comes to choices like this, I've kind of become a bit jaded about Nintendo's decisions. But again, in the past, I feel like they've had some sort of sensible justification, even if I didn't agree with it. I don't think they have that anymore. And honestly, for a docked only, shall we call it, Switch 2, its only draw at that point is its power. Because otherwise, unless it really is, again, a generational upgrade like it is the next generation of Nintendo consoles, if it's not that, then we've already got, the games that it can play on, the normal hybrid model. And so, what's the point?
Well, the point will be if they lock it behind a new cartridge or a new, if it's not backwards compatible with the Switch, or if they change everything about it, if it's a whole new different console, we'll have to switch over if we want to continue playing Zelda and Metroid.
Which, again, is, another thing that's kind of a disappointing thing to consider, because, if that's the case, then that means we lose our portability after just a few short years of having realized how wonderful it's been. The Switch 2 needs to be one of two things. It either needs to be a current generation, if it's going to be part of the current generation of Switch consoles, I still think it must be able to match the systems that are coming out. I don't think that, just being able to support the 4K 60 FPS standard that we currently have is going to be enough. I think the thing I'm worried about with this being a 4K 60 FPS compatible current gen version of the Switch, what that's going to do is I feel like they're going to, for Nintendo's mainline games that they're also releasing on the Lite and the hybrid models, it's going to be, those games are going to be held back to those standards, even though, the Switch 2 would be capable of a whole lot more. Unless they were to take the approach that PCs do. And I think that this is something that could make this a bit more viable. If they were to, create some sort of, patch in older, in currently existing Switch games where it recognizes if you're playing on a Switch 2 and it introduces major upgrades that support 4K 60 FPS. And that, when you put it in like the normal hybrid model or the Lite model, then it detects that you're playing, the original way, and it just it has that for that version. So I think that if they introduced in retrospect some sort of scaling for existing games, then maybe that would make it not feel like the Switch 2 was this really powerful machine that still can only play a game that is as good looking as the normal models, because that's the lowest common denominator and that's what they have to make the games for. I think if they scale it, if they took that approach, but they did some scalings for the games, then maybe that would work. And in that way, I could find myself feeling okay with that approach, you know, because then the Switch 2 would be a lot more capable of receiving, you know, the current gen ports without having to make so many concessions, and so maybe that would really open the gates for more third-party offerings, and obviously they would be Switch 2 exclusive, or in the cases of some people who are willing to, you know, to do such a scaling approach like we've been talking about, then maybe there would be scaled back versions on the, you know, the Switch Hybrid and the Switch Lite, and not scaled back versions on the Switch 2 or something like that.
That'd be a lot of work, though. I don't think third parties want to do all that.
No, so honestly, I think that the third parties would probably just recognize, hey, the Switch 2 exists for us to port it to Nintendo's consoles without having to make concessions. And honestly, I think that would be the most likely situation. But again, you know, the weird kind of problem they're creating for themselves potentially here is that again means that unless Nintendo themselves creates scaling ability in their own games in the same way that PC games do, then what's going to happen is all Nintendo first-party games will all look about only as good as a normal Switch can handle, and only the third-party ports will look good on the Switch too. And I think that would be kind of a shame. But then, you know, here's a side problem that they essentially also create for themselves, and I think this is one of the reasons why I'm still not certain I love the idea, even if they do take that approach, is that, you know, like one of the other draws I feel like for me with the current Switch version is that, you know, there's not that big a difference between the docked experience and the portable experience. You feel like you're still getting the full version of the game. But I think if there really does become, you know, a big difference between docked and handheld, then, you know, that kind of in a way makes you feel more like maybe you are getting punished for playing in portable when you know, like it can look better in docked mode. And I feel like having a bigger difference there, in a way, kind of right off the bat compromises the value of the portability. Now, am I arguing for keeping things? Does this sound like I'm, you know, going backward and saying, okay, so I do want it to the lowest common denominator? I
sure think so.
You goober. I don't want them to keep it to the lowest common denominator, but I can't help but think that in a way it's still creating ambiguity in their own intentions that kind of weakens what the original draw of the Switch was. So in the end, and I don't know if this has all just been a lot of really scattered-brained thoughts about something that may not even exist. You know, I think we have talked about how, like, with Nintendo's indications that they really want to keep supporting the Switch, that, you know, we can probably assume that this Switch 2 might not be the next generation unless they intend to turn the Switch into another 3DS. They keep supporting the Switch, but, you know, the big budget Nintendo games are again on the console, which in a way already weakens the Switch again, you know.
Yeah, I was going to say they're going to have to be really careful about that because they'll be alienating a lot of fans and possibly angerifying some fans too, because, you know, they said a 10-generation console, most generations last for about 5-6 years. That will only be about 4 at that point. They'll be cutting it short in favor of a more powerful console, possibly the next generation console, and taking away the hybrid at the same time. So it's like a double punch in the gut. So you know, I guess maybe I'll sum it all up this way. I'll tell you what I think that should happen if this is true, but then I'll also say what I would ultimately really truly prefer. If the Switch 2 is a home-only console, then despite all of the things I've said, I think the only way that it can be viable and stand against the competitors without its portability is to be able to stand toe-to-toe, or as close as they can as they can get. But I think it needs to be toe-to-toe, because now they have no excuses for budgeting, you know, for keeping this budget. You know, even then, it's still going to be sad to lose that portability. Ultimately, I think it would be best if it really is a home console that it needs to be. I think it would be best for it to be the next generation. I agree.
Because then that would introduce less ambiguity, and then they could just keep this thing alive, you know, the current Switch alive, despite moving forward as well. Kind of like Sony did with the PS2. That thing lasted forever.
Forever.
But ultimately, my truest hope, I want the Switch 2 to be still portable. I want it to be a hybrid. I just want it to be really powerful. And you know what? If I know that if it's portable, it probably won't stand toe-to-toe. But, you know, if it's a big increase and, you know, and it looks great, then, you know, I think that's kind of what fans are looking for with a Pro, Switch 2, whatever you want to call it, model.
Yep, I 100% agree with that.
But anyway, if this is true Nintendo, don't pull your punches because you don't have a leg to stand on.
Oh, snap. I like it. Well, you heard it here first. Nintendo only has one leg.
Oh.
Anyway, if you like this video, please give us a like. Let us know whether or not you are agreeing with this scenario or what you like about it, what you don't like about it. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button on your way out. Do you have anything else to add, Anthony?
No, other than just keep it nerdy.